Hey guys, this is Patrick Hall with fstoppers.com, and today I got my hands on the brand new Tamron 35 1.4 Prime. We're gonna be doing some fashion and some sportswear. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Now, as I mentioned, we're gonna be doing some kind of fashion shoot with a lot of motion and color. And to add the color, I'm gonna be using one of these RGB lights that we've been reviewing. This is the Falcon Eyes F7 pocket light. I thought this would be really cool if we could actually use this instead of gelling our lights. But as you can see, these lights aren't very powerful, so the first thing that I need to do is black out this room, and I'm using these nice V-flats from V-Flat World. These collapse, they're portable, and because we're in Puerto Rico, it's actually very hard to find these in normal stores. So I've built a couple of these and I've placed them around the room. We do have some nice natural window light. This is gonna help me eliminate all the light in the room so that I can get my exposure perfect. Now, if I'm using these LED lights for color, I'm gonna be using the ProPhoto B10 to actually light my subject. Now, the reason I wanna use flash is excellent for freezing motion. So if my subject is moving and jumping around, the flash is gonna make it nice and sharp. The LED lights, on the other hand, these are great for adding motion blur because they're constantly on. Every time my subject moves, that light is going to burn the image into my sensor, and that's gonna give me that nice fluid motion. All right, so I'm just putting the B10 up on this nice boom arm. This is going to allow me to boom the light up over the camera, so it's not gonna be in the way. It's also going to allow the light to be in a nice position. I don't want the light really side lit, I want it really right over her. This light stands perfect for that. Now for these Falcon Eyes lights, these just spin right on top of this threaded bolt. I'm gonna set this light to a kind of a blue cyan color, and then I'm gonna set the second light, which I have over here. I'm gonna make this one red. This is a really popular color scheme that you see in photography and in movies a lot. I think this is going to help not only give nice color in the motion, but it's gonna give some separation from the backdrop. All right, this is Krystal. Krystal, what's your last name?
Xamairy.
Xamairy. You were Miss
X.
Krystal X. If you want her Instagram, it's right below. You're actually a former Miss Earth, Puerto Rico. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds pretty awesome.
It's one of the 5 Grand Slams, so it's very
5 Grand Slams. She's right here in the F-Stopper studio. So as you can see with this lighting setup, we have a nice beam of light that's gonna be hitting Krystal, and then we also have the lights coming from behind. Let's get the camera set up and let's get into it. The concept for the shoot, you should know by now, we're trying to get a lot of motion, a lot of color. I'm gonna try to get this first shot completely all in camera. That's the way real photographers do it, right? So we're gonna try to balance our strobe light perfectly with the long shutter that we need to allow the LED lights to burn into the frame. All right, so I've been taking some test shots and I found that I have to set my light really low because if I turn the strobe light up too high, it's just way too powerful and I'm never gonna find that happy medium balance that I need. So I'm shooting at 1 power on the ProPhoto B10. I also have the grid on, which is killing a lot of light. I've just worked on getting the light perfect so that Krystal's face is lit in a really flattering way. And now I'm just playing with the shutter. I found that somewhere between half a second and 2 full seconds is the perfect amount of time to allow Krystal to get the first picture and then move and get some motion. If I go too fast, there's no time for her to move. And if I go too long, all of the ambient light starts to get really muddy and the image just completely falls apart. So my basic settings are 2.8. I'm stopping down just a little bit on this lens. I'm shooting at half a second, and then I'm shooting at the lowest ISO. Now, I was playing around with the rear sync curtain and all of that, but I found that the easiest way to direct my model is to have the front curtain on so that the flash fires, she's in the perfect position, and then from there she moves. If you try to do it the other way, she's trying to move and then get in the perfect position, it's a whole lot harder. Now, the other thing that we've been working on is the actual motion. So we've been having her raise her hands, move her face, spin around in circles. She's basically been doing everything but jumping up and down. And so you really need to find that perfect amount of movement because you really want to make sure that you don't have any of that light leaking into the face, but you have all that nice motion blur on the outside of the frame. So let's get back to shooting, get this video light off. For the first shot, we tried to get everything right in camera, which is a lot harder to do, but it's pretty cool. For this one, I'm gonna do a much more elaborate lighting setup, but then my plan is to add some lighting effects in post to make the final image all come together. So let me show you what I've built out here. For the key light, we're using the same B10. It's gonna be a hard light, but this time, instead of using a very small grid, I put this reflector dish on, which is gonna broaden the light up a little bit. But then to keep the light from spilling on our backdrop so that we can still keep everything nice and dark, I have added a grid that inserts directly into this reflector dish. Now, when Krystal gets back in front of the camera, in front of all of these lights, I'm gonna have to make sure that this light is hitting her perfectly. If it's throwing weird shadows in an unflattering direction, that's not gonna look good. So my main concern over everything that's going on here is to get this light perfectly placed so that her face looks incredible. Now, the next light that I want to talk about is a hair light. I've positioned another B10 up and behind the model. I've fitted this with a very small softbox, so it's gonna get a soft light, but it's not gonna be so large that it's throwing light everywhere. I'm going for a very dramatic mood in this image, and I don't wanna soften everything up too much, but I definitely don't want it to be bare bold. And the final light that I'm gonna be using in the flash setup is going to be this strip box. Now, with a hard light as the key light, I'm anticipating a lot of her body might fall into shadow. So I've set up this 1.5 by 4 foot strip box. And as you can see, it's just gonna add a little bit of fill. It's really not doing a whole lot, but it's there just to give a little bit of detail since this is going to be a really dark and moody shot. So now that I've talked about the 3 lights, the key light, the hair light, and the fill light, obviously I have my gelled light panels back here as well. Since I'm gonna be compositing this shot, my goal is to have some of this gelled light hitting my subject so that she has actual colored light on her skin, and then when I composite some of the light flares in the background, it's going to match. What I definitely don't want is to shoot everything with white strobe light and then try to add in the colors in the back and it's just gonna look like a composite. If I can actually shoot the shots with real colored light hitting her, it's gonna look a lot more natural. So Krystal's ready, let's get her in here, let's start taking some pictures. So these pictures are turning out great. Let me tell you what I've been doing as I've been shooting. Unlike the first shoot where I was dragging the shutter, I started off shooting with a really fast shutter. I'm shooting at 5.6 to give me some extra depth of field. And I really focused just on getting the lighting set up perfect for her. I'm not concerned at all about getting the motion blur in camera like I was previously. In fact, I'm just trying to get the lighting to look great on her with all the flashes. And then I've slowly started to slow my shutter just enough to get the bleed through from the LED lights so that I have a sharp image that's not blurry, but I have enough of the hot lights bleeding in so that I get that nice color cast on both sides of the model. Now the final thing that I'm gonna do here, because I'm building this image in post, is I need to get a lot of blurry shots. And I might do some motion with the LED panels, but while I have the model here, I'm going to drag my shutter to about 4 seconds, and then I'm just gonna move the camera around. I'm gonna have Krystal move around a little bit, but between her moving and the camera moving, I'm gonna get some crazy shots that hopefully I can just layer on top and then blend behind her. So for these shots, I've removed my trigger. I'm not using flash at all, and I'm just shooting using the LED lights. Now, while I had the strobes turned off, I decided to take a few photos at 1.4 using the Tamron lens's large aperture. This gives a super shallow depth of field that doesn't require strobe light at all. All right, so we got some really cool images from both shoots. Let's head to the computer, work our magic, and see if we can make these images look really awesome. All right guys, so here we are in the post-production studio. I want to try to make this quick, but I do want to cover a lot of things. First and foremost, I want to show you some of the final images that I thought were usable. I think it's really important for you guys to remember, once you get all of the lighting set up, you don't want to fail to capture some really good frames. I know we do a lot of critique the communities where we say, oh my gosh, I just wish there was one more frame where the model's face looked a little bit better, it'd be a winner. But sometimes people don't get that. So I just want to show you all of the frames so you can see what these look like straight out of camera before we go into editing the final images themselves. So as you can see here, we had a lot of really cool shots, and you can see that motion blur adds a lot. This was all done in camera, keep in mind. I love this shot. This is really, really cool. And as you can see up here, we're shooting at 2.8 and 1/2 of a second. And I was able to get that nice motion blur while still having a nice sharp image on my subject. For this shot, I wanted a little bit more depth of field, and I also wanted to extend my shutter a little bit more. So you can see I changed to f8 and 2 seconds. And then these images I thought were really cool because I started to get the ghosting effect of her face. This was shot at 2 seconds, but I opened up just a little bit more to f5. And these are probably my favorite shots of the entire session. I really love that shot. That's great. Now, moving on to the sports shoot, one thing I want to really emphasize is when you're shooting something like athletic wear and you don't have any props, in many cases, you want to take a bunch of different poses. So as we go through these images, you can see I kind of had her doing the running pose, We then did kind of a boxer look. I don't think she looks like she's ever taken a punch before, so this one really didn't work out. I didn't stay on this too long. We did some other kind of stretching, you know, athletic type poses here. Face up, face down. You want to make sure you get all of this variety. And then I thought, she kind of looks like a tennis player, so I thought, why don't we add a tennis racket? So if you're doing something like this, it really helps to have props. So if you have tennis rackets or volleyballs or golf clubs, just adding the littlest bit of production to this helps bring the whole image together and makes it feel like a more complete photo shoot. There's no doubt that images like this are also useful, but once I put the tennis racket in her hand, I feel like the whole thing really came together. This is actually going to be one of the images that we're going to work on. And then Krystal put the racket up to her face like this, and it was something I wouldn't have thought to have told her to do, but when she did it, I instantly thought, man, that looks really graphic, it's really clean, and it looks like this could be the main shot of the entire photo shoot. So I really love this image, and we're gonna wind up editing this one as well. And then she turned off to the side, and we got some other ones too. And then after shooting these images with strobe, I wound up turning on the modeling light so that we could get some video footage as well. And so because the Tamron lens goes to 1.4, which is a really wide open aperture, I was able to get this really shallow depth of field look that isn't very easy to do with strobe. So if I zoom in here, you can see just how sharp it is. I'll look at the makeup around her eyes. It's crystal clear. And then her left eye starts to go out of focus. Her skin right here, I mean, she has some of the best skin I've ever seen. So as you'll see, we don't really have to retouch a lot. But as I start going down, you can see her chin starting to blur. And then the rest of her body is completely out of focus. So if you want that super shallow depth of field, don't be afraid to shoot just with the modeling lights. It's a technique I use all the time. And then no photo shoot would be complete without a little behind the scenes photo. This is great for marketing material. You can put this up as a teaser. And it's also great for reference. If you ever want to recreate this lighting setup again, you know exactly where everything was set up. So here's the first image straight out of camera, and the first thing that I need to do is I need to remove all of the lights from the backdrop. Now, when you're shooting this way and the background's really, really dark, you could easily grab the clone tool and you could start manually removing this the old-fashioned way. And that definitely works, but sometimes your background has variations in it and it might have some gradients that are going to be really hard to clone and make them look natural. So let me show you what I did that's a lot quicker and easier than using the clone tool. I came up here to the marquee tool and I just selected this whole side of the image. You can come up to transform and choose distort. I'll zoom out a little bit and I'm just basically going to stretch the entire canvas off to the right. Let's do the same thing to the left side of the frame. I might even leave some of those flares in there. That looks pretty cool. And that makes cleaning up your background incredibly simple. So if I turn on this next layer, this is just the background completely cleaned up. I then added a curves adjustment layer just to brighten everything up a little bit. And then using frequency separation, I just did a little bit of skin retouching. This is a technique that you can easily learn online. There's a lot of tutorials on that. And from toggling this on and off, you can see I really didn't have to do a lot of skin retouching. I just kind of lightened up her eyes and I removed some of the shadows on the right side of her face, but her skin was pretty flawless. So now that I have the image straight out of camera looking really nice, I want to show you how I created what will essentially become the final image. Now all of these blurred streaks, I could have bought them on a stock website or something, but I decided to create them myself just using the LED. And what I actually did was I tied it to a string and then spun it around my head, and I just did the self timer and allowed the camera to capture a bunch of different frames. Let me show you what those frames look like. So the first shots that I did initially, you can see they're just really broad and they're super bright. I just felt like this wasn't really exactly what I was going for. This looks like a light painting and I didn't really want the final image to look like that. You can also see in some of these shots the LEDs are showing up and I feel like I completely lost the whimsical mood that I was going for. Here again are the LEDs. By adding a little bit of paper on top of the light, I was able to remove those streaks, which I think makes this look a lot more natural. And then this shot really has more of the vibe that I'm going for. I felt like this felt more organic. It doesn't scream LED panel. And then I love how it's wide and then it gets narrow. This is definitely what I'm trying to recreate. Now, in order to make this light painting even broader and more soft, I wound up moving closer to the camera, and then I would swing the LED really close to the camera, which then, because I had the camera focused much further in front, it blurred out the light painting. And I wound up with frames like this that just looked, I think, really awesome. And this is what I wound up using. So you'll see these frames mixed into these final compositions. Now I'm also going to show you how you can change these light painting colors to different colors in case you don't have an RGB light. But if you go into Lightroom and you just play with the temp and the tint and then the saturation, you can turn the colors to any color that you want here in Lightroom, but I'm going to show you a way that you can really fine tune this. So let me turn this layer off and I'll build this up step by step so you can see exactly how I created this. So here's one of my light painting frames that I've just put right on top of the model, and as I toggle this on and off, you can see it's darkening her quite a bit. So what I want to do is I want to come up here to my layer blending mode and I want to change it from normal, and you probably want to go to lighten, overlay, or screen. For this shot, I'm going to go to screen. So if I toggle this on and off now, you can see the image just blends into the final frame a lot better. I then added a layer mask so that I could paint out some of these highlights so that they didn't go completely over the model. And as you can see, this kind of sets her in the middle of the light painting. I have some of the streaks going over her body, but I have a lot of them sitting behind her. The goal was to make this feel like it wasn't a composite just sitting on top or behind a layer mask. I really wanted to blend her in the middle of all of this. Now, obviously, this is blue, and the right side of the frame should be magenta. So let me show you how I went from here to here. This is a really cool technique that I learned from Brian Rogers, who's a product photographer. He uses this technique all the time, but that doesn't mean that you can't apply it to your own work in something more fashion oriented. So if I come down here to this little circle, this little half circle, I can come up here and go to solid color. And now I want to go to a bright color. So maybe I'll just choose, I don't know, like a bright yellow here. And you can see this looks absolutely horrible, but now we need to pin this layer to the image below. So if we just hit Alt and then go down the little line, you can see this little arrow down here. You're going to click that, and now it has pinned this image to the underlying image. And we now need to go up here to our blending modes, and we need to change this to color. And now you can see I've changed the light streaks from being blue to yellow. So this is a great Photoshop technique when you just simply need to change the color of something. Just do this little mask, boom, you're done. I'm going to delete this one out, and I'm going to show you the pink one. So now that I have my pink lights all in place, I wanted to add a couple other frames on top of this, blend them in, and have it to where, you have the blue on the left and the pink on the right. So here's another frame that I really liked. I added a layer mask and just painted it in so that it kind of hid behind my model. I also felt like my model's arm could be a little bit more blue. I love this natural blur that we got on the left side, but I went ahead and just painted just with a paintbrush on another layer and just added a little bit more blue on her hair and on her arm. And then I just put one more of these light painting frames on top. As you can see, I moved it hard to the left. It actually ends here on the right. But then by adding a layer mask, I just painted that in, and it just added a little bit more light near her racket. So if I turn this whole group on and off, you can see how this sits. I think this looks really cool, and you can do a lot with it. I can also come here on the group and turn the opacity down, which I already did. I turned it down to 41. Here it is at full blast. That might be a little much. But you can make it super subtle and just have it barely sitting back there in the background. I thought somewhere around 34% looks pretty good. And then the final step, if you highlight everything and you hit Control-Shift-Alt-E, it will actually make a brand new layer which squishes everything into one final photo. And to really make this pop and bring everything together, you guys know I always use Alien Skin on almost all of my images. Alien Skin's recently dropped the whole Alien Skin name. It's just called Exposure X now. They've released a brand new software called Exposure X5. So if I come up here, I can just hover over all these presets and they give you a lot of different options. For an image like this, where you can really go in many different directions, it's pretty cool to see what's possible. If I take an image like this, it's adding a lot of grain. Looks really cool, but the film look that I wound up going with is a Polaroid. It's a 669 cyans in the shadows look. And if I toggle this on and off, you can see it just makes everything a little bit more neon. It punches the whites a little bit more, and then on her skin, it just adds a little bit of blue compared to the warmth that I had straight out of camera. So if I hit apply, there's our before and our after. But if we zoom all the way into about 200%, you can see it added a nice grain to the backdrop and it makes everything look seamless. You would never really know that I did such a crude retouching on the backdrop. So now let's look at the second image. This is probably the flagship image from this photo shoot. I'm really excited about this one, and it's using some of the same techniques. So I'll quickly run through this so you can see exactly how I did it. So here's the image almost straight out of camera. I did stretch the backdrop again to get rid of the lights. You can see here that you got a little bit of light flare on the sides, but I used the exact same technique to clean up the backdrop on this one. If I zoom in here, I did do a little bit of skin retouching using the frequency separation technique. you can see I really had to do very, very little. If we zoom back out, I then wound up cleaning up the bottom of the background, but as I was looking at this, I thought, you know what, that little bottom of my seamless paper, it almost looked like the top of a net at the tennis court, and I thought, you know, it would be really cool to take this one step further to actually put a tennis court net in the background. So you know what I did? I went outside to a tennis court late at night, took the same LED lights, lit the tennis court the same way that I lit my model, and I just composited in a blue frame on the left and then a magenta frame on the right, and I feel like this really brings the image together. I have just the littlest hint of the tennis court lines back here, but I thought this was really, really cool. I then added a levels just to like darken everything up and kind of give the bottom part of the frame the same kind of contrast. And then here is the frame that I wound up using for the light swoosh, and I thought this really looked perfect. I loved how it went straight up and then came down through the bottom. Now, obviously, you can't see the underlying image at all, so we need to come up here and change normal down to, let's do lighten or screen. And if you look at her face, you can tell lighten is not bringing enough light on her face, whereas screen, you can see right through it and it gives that really clear look. We're gonna select screen. And then of course, I don't want the light painting all over her body. I want some of it behind her, probably in this case, most of it behind her. So I added a layer mask and then I just painted out all of that light on her body. If I wanted to add just a little bit of flare over her body, I could come back here with the white brush, maybe paint some in on her face. And it just kind of adds a little bit, makes it more believable that she's sitting in this flare versus just right in front of it. Now for this particular image, I didn't want to go crazy and add a bunch of frames like I did in the previous one, but I do need the flares on the right to be that pink color again. So what did I do? I went up here and added another solid color. For this one, I'll just make this green just so that you guys can see exactly what I did. Now it already clipped it to the bottom here, so I don't have to do that, but I do still need to go down to color. Now this made the lights green, which obviously doesn't match our color palette. But if I turn on my magenta solid color, you can see we now have a nice punchy color that looks very close to the color that's on her flesh. I actually could probably tweak that a little bit more. Maybe it's got like a little bit more red in it. And once you apply it, you can just see exactly what it's doing. So that actually might be a better color right there. And then what I thought would be cool for this image is to have it transition from pink to the same blue. So I added a layer mask and then I just painted right behind her. Now what's nice about this is I could change this transition and have it kind of change colors midway through. That's kind of a cool effect, but for this particular photo, I thought it would be best just to leave it and have it to where it just transitions right behind her, and boom, that's how that whole image came together. Now, with a technique like this, especially with these light flares, you don't have to mask everything perfectly. So I can come back here and start painting in some of the flares back on top of her body. Something like that might be a little extreme, but you may want just a little bit of color to like sneak out, especially around the edges of her body. It just makes the blend seem a little bit more natural. You can kind of see on her sports bra here, I've added some pink that wasn't there, which might be more believable. If I paint that out entirely, I'm just left with the pink that was there from the hot lights in the original picture. So once we have everything, we're gonna hit Shift, Control, Alt, E. That's going to make one single merged image. And then as always, come up to Filters, Exposure 5. And I'm still looking at the 669 Polaroid color films, and you can see these do some really cool things. I think for this one, I'm gonna stick with the cyan shadows, hit Apply. What I love about this image is it's so graphic and it has so much color and saturation, but it also has a lot of room for text, which is really good if you're trying to do some kind of campaign for a major brand. And because it's shot at such a high resolution, I can come up here and I can crop really, really tight. So if I wanted to do something really extreme, that's pretty cool. I mean, that looks like a campaign that's ready to go. So really excited about this photo shoot. This was a technique that I'd played around with a little bit, but I'd never really created anything like this before in my portfolio. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. This was a really fun shoot. As you know, I don't usually shoot on prime lenses all that much. I'm more of a Tamron 24-70 person. I like having the flexibility, but I have to say, looking at these images full res, all the way zoomed in, this thing is razor sharp. This is a really fun technique that is awesome to have in your back pocket. Clients love it, and now you guys know how to do it. So I'm gonna be using this all the time. This is a good little trick to have in your bag that you can pull out at any given moment. I hope you guys learned a lot from this. If you want free daily content, make sure you head over to fstoppers.com where we have articles every single day. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel below if you want more free content like this. And if you want to learn from some of the best photographers in the world, check out fstoppers.com/store, where you can check out products on all genres of photography, including headshots, weddings, portraits, and product photography.